Everyone, it's the day we've all been waiting for, I'm sure. I am about to invite Melinda Moyer, the amazing, to join me once I remember how to do that. And we're gonna talk parenting books. Woohoo! There she is. This brilliant idea. I'm trying to go live on Facebook at the same time with my computer, but it's just not working. So if you see me looking to the side, that's what I'm gonna do. I see Melinda. Yay!
Hello.
Hi.
Hey. How are you?
I'm good. I had 40-year-old mom technology issues where I just forgot what I was doing.
Yeah, I
But
totally been there many times, many
it's
times.
fine, right? And I had this beautiful idea. I was going to try and go live on Facebook at the same time, but it's not working. So that's why I was a second late. So I'm going to try one
No
more
worries.
time here and see if it works. But
I'm gonna
the
move my lip down.
problem Oh, look at that. The problem is every time I think I've mastered something,
Yeah,
Facebook or Instagram, they're like, oh, we're going to make it better for you. But
right.
no,
No, they just
stop.
make it harder, right? I
Please
know.
stop changing things. I can only master so many things.
I know.
Yeah,
Especially in this time, this very messed up time where I feel
right.
like I'm barely functioning as a human being, maybe not even totally human anymore. I feel like I might be part
No,
something else. I don't
pretty
know.
subhuman at this point. Well, you know this because you're my research lady. I know I've read this, and I'm terrible about quoting where I've read things, but I know that when the body is stressed and anxious, that it actually impairs our short-term memory.
Yeah, I think there
And
is
so
some truth in that.
I keep reminding myself that because I'm just beyond the biggest ditz right now.
Yeah.
I've done so many stupid things.
Yeah.
I have dates in the wrong place on my calendar, and I'll
Oh, totally.
make two appointments at the same time and not notice until an hour before. And I get really hard on myself, get it together, Frankie, come on, be a professional. But I truly think that's what's going on. My
Hmm.
brain is so occupied with all the weird stress and worry beyond normal, just having kids and working and,
Right.
you know,
Absolutely. I completely agree. And
right.
I struggle with, because there's also so much research on stress and the psychosomatic symptoms, they're not psychosomatic, they're somatic symptoms of stress, they're real, where you can get,
Yes.
headaches and exhaustion. And I can't tell every day, I'm like, am I sick? Could
So,
this be Omicron, or am I just really stressed out and exhausted? I can't tell the difference anymore.
well, and same symptoms, right? So I saw you post that on your story last night, and I'm like, oh, and in my head, I've been writing a blog about this for months, but I haven't quite put it into words.
Who has
Um,
time? I know.
yeah, it's really tough. And I realize, as a person who tends to be anxious in the best of times,
Yeah.
I have spent 20 years training myself to pay a little bit less attention to my body,
That's
and
smart.
just be
Yep.
able to be huh, I feel something. Well, that's because bodies are complex and
Yeah.
you might have a sharp pain for a second and that's okay. That's the self-talk I've trained myself.
Mm,
And here we're in the middle of a pandemic where the experts are saying pay attention to your symptoms,
I know.
right?
Right.
I'm not angry they're saying that. That makes perfect sense. Monitor your children's symptoms, right? So I
Yeah.
said to my husband the other day, I'm like, well, I can't trust any of my mom instincts anymore. I
Mm,
can't just say, I think you're fine, go to school. And
right.
he's like, well, you kind of have to. You can't abandon all of that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It's
So
so,
it's very
it's,
tricky, right?
it's super tricky. My husband and I were dealing with this morning with our daughter. She's had an on-off fever since Tuesday. But
Oh my
yesterday
God.
she didn't have a fever at all and no other symptoms. But we tested her 5 times. It's all come back negative. But I
Oh,
also know that the tests don't always come back positive in the first couple of days. And then this morning she woke, last night, she's like, can I please go to school tomorrow? I haven't had a fever all
oh,
day. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. And then she woke up, she didn't have a fever. She tested her, she's negative. And she's like, but I don't feel good. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess. And she's like, and I'm like, do you really not feel good? Or you just not want to go to school? I can't even tell. And,
right.
my husband and I were like, well, we don't know what's going on. And eventually we kept her home because it's, almost the weekend. And like, if it is something like COVID, I don't want her to be spreading it. But it was such a hard decision because she looked fine. She didn't have a temperature. She hasn't had a temperature in a while. She's not coughing or anything. She's no snot, like no other symptoms. Tested negative. I'm like, on paper, she's fine to go to school, but like,
Right.
this is such a weird time. And so anyway, sorry, that was
Yeah.
a long,
So
but it was
that's
so
what
hard.
happened when you said you didn't feel well. So like, I think it's been 2 weeks now. I like time is, I don't even know, but we had a vacation, which was wonderful. And then like, as soon as I was supposed to go back to work, I got hit with something, and I have some autoimmune stuff. So I have
Oh,
fibromyalgia. And if you know the science, like
oh
if you
yeah.
look up the symptoms, there's like 200 of them, right? So, I just feel like crappy sometimes, and
Yeah.
it often is not an indication of anything except like, oh, that sucks. Like, take care of yourself. So I sort of was like, okay, I'm having a flare. And then, about a week into it, I got a sore throat, and I'm like, oh, okay. So, I had some like at home tests. I like did what I was supposed to do, and I wasn't really that concerned because no one else had it. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it can't be COVID. But then my kids started to not feel well. So we did all the testing at home. Everything was negative. And then the school, I was honest with the school because I thought that made sense. And they're like, well, because they have COVID symptoms, they need a PCR test to return.
Oh yeah.
And again, like, not mad at them. It was frustrating to me because it was very hard to find them here. But
Right.
again, like, if they were talking about someone else's kid coughing and sneezing, I'd be like, yeah, get them a PCR test, right?
Right. Right.
So we did that, and we were all negative. But now I wonder if we did still have COVID. I have no idea.
Right.
Um, because it hit me the hardest, which is really weird.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and like being a teacher for years, I usually don't get what the kids get. I get like my
Mm-hmm.
own weird stuff. So yeah, so it's very weird. And we deal with a little bit of school refusal in my house. Like, I have a kid who's really struggles with transitions. So, her go-to when she's overwhelmed is my head, my throat, my stomach hurt. It's always those three things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's been interesting navigating the last few years. And I don't want to tell schools how to set their policy because they don't need my opinion. Like, I feel I'm so empathize with, I try, I guess I can't really empathize, but sympathize with what they're going through. But I also know like she does need a little push. So, oh
Mm-hmm.
my goodness, it's a complicated time.
It is. It is. By the way, speaking of your daughter, I loved your book. It was so
Oh
real.
my
I
God,
mean,
thank you.
yeah. I mean, our messages align so much in our books, as I know you've noticed.
Yes,
And
yes.
I just like, I loved just like, you just were so like genuine and authentic and honest about your family and everything that's so hard about being a parent when you have very different children and just navigating all those. I just
Thank
really,
you.
really enjoyed it. And I
Thank
love the
you.
title.
Thank you. Thank you. And I love yours. I was laughing this morning in my head. I was like, how many titles, like how many books about parenthood have like, 4-letter words in them,
Yeah.
I'm like, there's a lot of them. And that's so telling, right? Because it is so like high stakes, high stress. Um, and I love how your book, I love the research angle. It's so different than sort of the way like I got into like parenting expert territory, and I still like hesitate to use that term
I know, me
because
too.
again, like if you read my book, I'm like, I only say I'm like the world's most okayest mom. Like I won't take any other title because who can be more than that? And it's like I hesitated with some of the things I put in the book, but I also felt like it was sort of my obligation or my goal to say like, okay, listen, like next in May, I'm going to have a degree in social work and education, like 2 masters. So this is my life's work, and I still screw it up all the time, like
Yeah.
every day,
Yeah.
and I'm still struggling, like COVID pandemic parenting. So if the only thing someone gets from the book is that it's okay if it's hard and you don't have to be perfect,
Mm-hmm.
all
Exactly.
right, like I did my job, right?
Yeah. Such an important message because we just
Yeah.
hold ourselves to such high standards and we're so hard on ourselves.
I,
And but yet
yes.
everybody struggles. Yeah, I have so many friends who are like child psychologists who say, we don't know what we're doing ever. It's so hard.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, and also just like applying the things from like working with other children or the research and then using that in your own family. That's really hard to sort of transition that into your own life, even if you know it like you know,
Mhm.
on a certain level, just like actually
It
using it with your own family is very hard.
it really is, and that's why like this book took me a while to get to, like for me personally. So my oldest is 15. I've been at the parenting game for a while, but it really took me many years as a parent to realize that some of what I was doing professionally could help me. Like I knew I
Hmm.
had some decent instincts from the classroom and whatnot, but it took a long time to translate.
Yeah.
Um, and still, like I am so much better with anyone else's child than my own
Yeah.
because there's no like the emotional, I guess, like attachment's different.
Absolutely.
There's not like the mom guilt. I'm not
Yeah.
analyzing how I'm doing it when I'm doing it. It's just
Right.
I'm not as harsh of a critic to myself, and I'm working professionally. So yeah, it is really interesting, for sure. And I was just going back over some of the stuff I loved in your book yesterday, and you talk about how you like see this stuff in your own children, and the different parenting philosophies. And there was this part where you were talking about how you don't really like label yourself as any one type of parent. Like
Mm.
there's bits that you sort of identify with more, and I don't really either. And I when I write about parenting, I really feel like I pull things from all the different sources I've read and things
Yeah.
I've lived, and um, different phases call for different things. Like right now, it's a really different type of parenting
Hmm.
than it was in 2019. There's just
Yeah.
nothing
Very true.
you can do
Yep.
about it. Yeah. I don't know if you know, oh my God, I'm totally going to forget her name. She wrote a great book called like The Tantrum.
Oh, yeah.
I
Rebecca Schwag Hirschberg.
Yeah, yes.
I love
Yes.
her. Yeah.
She's the best. And her post yesterday was about how like she's meeting with parents, and what's the theme that's coming up the most right now? Candy. It like cracked me up. It's
Oh.
so like the way I think. She said, if giving your kids an extra piece of candy is buying you 15 minutes of peace, like go for it. And I had to joke, and I had to share a post on my story that I wrote sometime during this pandemic about how like some days I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like, follow my like 10-step program. I'm going to do what I know how to do. And some days I'm like, here's some gummy bears, and hope for the
Absolutely.
best.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love Rebecca. Her, for those of you who don't know her, her Instagram is Little House Calls, all one word,
Yes.
right? And then,
Yep.
and I totally agree with that. And I also love Virginia Soul Smith, who's _Soul Smith. Her, like, she
Ooh.
writes a lot about food and kids and just like why it's okay to eat for comfort right now, like why we don't need to
Yes.
stress about what our kids are eating, how they're probably getting the nutrition they need, and we just need to like, that's, I mean, there's so many things we have to worry about right now, but like
Right.
not worrying about what our kids are eating, like we should not be worrying about what our kids are eating. That is the least important thing right now. Like just let it go. And honestly, like if we need to use screens sometimes in this very, very difficult time more than we would like, that's also not going to ruin our kids. And I got into a lot of that in my book. Like, what do we
I
really know about screens? And
Yes. I love the stuff you write about screens. The chapter in your book was so fantastic. I love how you like take each bit apart and say, okay, so what does the research say? And you wrote a newsletter recently
mm-hmm.
that even delved into it deeper. I sent it to all my friends. I'm like, see, we're okay. Like
Oh,
Melinda says we're fine. Like she's got the research. Like it's not just me being like, I think I read something that said it was okay. No, 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 we got it. Like we're good. And yeah, I mean,
we need
I
that.
have right. And I have to say, like, in this time, there's been a lot of like new media out there about, Instagram was sort of on the hot seat,
Oh
and
yeah.
oh my God, it was TikTok or Snapchat. There's been like, it's been tied to eating disorders, and okay,
Yeah.
sure. Like, I'm sure that there's a lot of validity to that, but also look what it's given us. Like, if we had gone through this pandemic when I grew up, in the 80s, oh my God, we would
Yeah.
have been so much more isolated. Can you imagine
Yeah.
us all waiting for that one phone line?
Right. Oh my God.
No.
I know
Um,
it's so true. You kind of have to separate out, like there's so many different things that kids can do with screens, right? Like, yes, there's
mhm.
some stuff that we know is not great for especially like teen girls who are really passively scrolling through Instagram, seeing, other
Yes.
friends hanging out with each other and seeing pictures, that are all the effects done so that everybody looks great. Like that's not great, but there's so many other things that you do. Like kids can play games together and collaborate, and
Hmm.
they can make things, they can create apps. I mean, they can do just like so much. My kids love doing this app that's just literally like drawing on their iPad,
Uh-huh.
and making art. And like, that's not terrible, like that's very
No.
different from like a violent video game. So, but we tend to
Yes.
group all these things together and lump them all together and say like screen time is bad. Well, it isn't all bad, and it really depends on the kid. It depends on what they're
Right.
doing. There's a lot of different things we have to consider.
Absolutely. It's the same with video games. Like
Yeah.
there's certainly ones that I would not want my 9.5-year-old exposed to, but he's also like running around moving and exercising in some of them.
Hmm.
And it's 9 degrees here today in
Yeah.
Michigan. So like if he wants to if he comes up from the basement sweating, playing the Switch, like high five. Like good job, mom. Like
I know.
like great.
Totally.
And right. And so it's interesting. I have a lot of, so because I'm getting another degree, because, I felt like I should be super insane
Oh
busy
my
during the
gosh, you
pandemic.
are?
Well, so I have one more semester and then I'll be an official clinical social worker. But I've been seeing
Wow. Yeah.
patients like for, oh my God, for about a year now. And so I work with a lot of like teens and young adults, and there's this whole like gaming thing. It like drives parents crazy,
Mm.
and they feel like they're isolating and just wanting to game. But really, a lot of them have a lot of good social connections through it. It's a way to see like friends who went out of state for college, and they're even like meeting new people in some like safe ways. And I actually have seen some of my patients who struggle with social skills practicing some like conversational skills through these like party rooms and gaming. And it's not something I totally get because I've never done it.
Yeah.
Right. Um, but I'll sometimes wake up and at like 7 a.m. my son is laughing hysterically playing Among Us with his cousins in Chicago. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome now. And they're an hour earlier. So I'm like, great. They kept them busy. They're not waking up their parents
Right.
and they're staying connected.
Yeah.
So yes, it's definitely, you have to see both sides. I mean, look at what we're doing now. Like this is
Right.
great.
Yeah.
We made it happen. It's not a TV show. It's just like we can broadcast. It's so cool. And I'm seeing now there's all these like fun people who join. So thank you guys.
Yeah.
And if you have questions for either of us, go ahead and put them in the comments and I'll read them. So it's super fun. This book came out, mine came out in October, my first book, and I've been so like pleasantly surprised and excited. I've connected with all these parenting authors.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a
and that's
great
all
community.
social media. It's
Hmm.
so great. Like everyone, and I know how busy everybody is because I know how busy I am, and everyone will answer a question. And it's a hard time to sort of market a book, and we can't do
Yeah.
things we used to do. So
Yeah.
it's been amazing. So yes, like both sides of the coin for sure. So I love this idea of like, let's make sure this is a problem before we panic. I
Hmm.
think we don't do that as parents a lot, right? And I've written about that like consistently throughout the pandemic because I'm trying to do it myself, not because I'm doing it perfectly,
Right.
but I've been finding myself doing that too. Like somehow I learned in the first few months of the pandemic that Costco sells like a 3-pack of whipped cream, like the spray kind, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, let's just put whipped cream on everything because,
That's awesome.
right? I thought we'd be done in a month. So I was like, yeah, I'll just cut the whipped cream out later. Well, who knew it'd be the third pandemic winter? But I started to ask myself, like, before I start to go down the rabbit hole, like, oh my God, I'm teaching my children terrible habits, they're never going to eat well. Like, is this actually a problem? Like,
Right.
what are the signs that this is a problem right now?
Right.
So yes, it's like, so I love the research angle. Let's see what we're seeing. Let's find out. Let's see
Right.
what people think is happening.
Yeah, no, it's so important during weird times like this to give ourselves and our families a little bit of like, yeah, like whipped cream every day. I mean, just something I mean, it's like creating a way of routine that
Yes.
and routines we know are so important for tumultuous times. Like yeah, if you're
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, you can have whipped cream with your waffles every morning. Like that's a night. First of all, it's just something like fun and a nice little
Right.
like silver lining, if you will, like, and but also, yeah, and it's like creating a routine with your family, and those are also
Mm-hmm.
important. So yeah, I completely agree. We've definitely like done things like that where, yeah, I remember sending my kids last year, especially with candy with their lunch every day, which I never had done before. But I'm like, you know
Right.
what? We're in the middle of a pandemic. You can have a piece of candy with your lunch every day. Like, let's just make this a little bit more
Right.
pleasant.
Yeah. And we can't say that school's the same. Like, we know
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's still wonderful in its own ways. Like, I'm so appreciative that my children are at school. And I think even the kids are. They won't necessarily admit it, but they are.
Yeah.
But you know what? They are wearing masks all day. And I am grateful. I'll put it out there. I think it's what we need to do. But it is a little bit more tiring, and it is a little bit harder to talk and to socialize.
Yeah.
And the teachers are stressed, and our kids, even like the ones who come in with a smiling face, and you can see I smile, right? Like, they are feeling it. So yeah, if you need that little boost of sugar, and we know it is a boost, okay. You know, now if they're coming home with a stomach ache, if they like have a stomach ache every day at 2:00, okay,
Right.
examine what they're eating. But if they're not, leave it alone, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's funny, I found myself like having a flashback to like early parenting, right, where they say like never wake a sleeping baby.
Mm-hmm.
That quote kept going into my head, and I'm like, wait a minute, like my kids are on the couch, I do not know how many hours of TV they watch, they're all together and they're laughing. Like, back up, Frankie, do not do
Yeah.
anything.
Don't interrupt
Just
that. Right.
leave them alone. Like,
Right.
it's all good.
Yeah.
So you know, it's an interesting sort of thing for sure.
Yeah. 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 No, I mean, we've really had to be flexible and like just sometimes question our instincts during these times because, yeah, we have to just, we have to adapt and we have to evolve with what's necessary or what feels right or whatever, you know, yeah, whatever seems to be working, even if it's not how you envision things working, you know, if
Right.
you
Well,
just,
nothing is how we imagine it,
oh
right?
God, no, nothing is, especially now. Right. I mean, I feel like this time is so hard because we all thought things were getting better. I just wrote about this. Like I was trying to figure out like, why does this moment in time feel so hard as a parent?
Yeah.
And one of the big things is just like, wait, we thought it was, we knew I knew there would be more variants. You know, I've talked to a lot of scientists during this,
Sure.
but like, gosh, wow, this one really just, vaccines don't really help.
I
I
don't,
mean, they help, believe me, they help, but like you still
yeah.
can get infected, but you don't obviously get very sick. But like,
I
wow,
don't
it's
think
just,
we imagined, I don't know, like, and I I laugh. You know that commercial? Like, maybe you and I are close enough in age that you remember the one like I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. You know
yeah,
that one?
yeah,
So I feel like I've become like a totally fake, like not qualified, like CNN, like health analyst at this point. Like, no qualifications. Like, no one should be listening to me, but I have consumed more news than I ever have in my life. So my friends do ask me questions, and I always try to give that like disclaimer. Like, I swear I don't understand what I'm listening to. But so in
totally.
everything I followed, I didn't expect like all of a sudden the numbers to be like triple what we've ever seen.
I
Like,
know.
yes. So I do think we feel a little like bamboozled because the summer was so like, oh my God, we did it. Like, woohoo. Like, we're awesome. And yeah,
Absolutely. And here we are.
it,
Yeah. That and then like the inconsistency. It feels like there's a lot of inconsistency in the messages we're getting, like and
yes,
the feelings we're feeling compared with the responses we're seeing maybe from
right.
from the government or schools or communities. Like all of this is
Yes.
mismatched. It just feels very like unsettled and uncertain and confusing right now. And I think
Yeah.
that's the hardest for me. And just like
Yeah.
making your own, like making decisions as a like for your family right now is very, very hard. As I said, like with, you know, kids having symptoms but testing negative, and you're like, what is going on? Do I believe the test? Do I believe the symptoms? Do I just assume it's COVID? What do I do? It's just there's no good information anymore. It almost feels like
No,
nobody knows what the hell's going on.
you know, the decision fatigue is insane.
Oh yeah.
Like, right. And there's so much like great stuff out there about like being default parents and what that does to you. And right now, like being the default parent during a pandemic. So I've now like really been sending my kids to my husband for everything because I'm like, I've been making big decisions all day. So they'll be like, can I have a popsicle? And I'm like, I just don't know.
I have no
So
idea.
I don't know. Like, I will not answer any more questions. You know,
Yeah,
I don't care what he
smart.
says, which is funny because like probably 2 years ago, I'd be like, no, I want to answer that question, but nah, I don't know. So yeah, the article you wrote that came out in was it the Atlantic yesterday?
Yeah.
So it's so funny.
The,
I just saw like the page, the face, the woman's screaming.
Yeah.
And I literally was like, oh, I got to read that later. And then I didn't realize it was you until later. And I'm like, oh yeah, I got to get to that one. Cause that's how I feel internally. I'm like, oh, how'd you know? Yeah, it's a,
Yeah. That the art was not me. That was all my editor at the Atlantic, but it was perfect. When I saw it go up, I was like, oh, that's a good picture to put with the story.
it's how we're all feeling inside.
Yep.
So, oh my God, we could talk about this forever. So like getting back to the book a little, I'm so curious, like other authors and their process. Tell me about, I'm so curious about your cover and the dinosaur and like whether there's a story, like how that happened.
Gosh, I wish I had a better story. It's really like my publisher is amazing, Putnam. And this was the second cover that they'd come up with actually. The first one was, I remember like the title was in crayon, like blue and pink crayon at first. And there was like pictures of like angry faces and stuff on the cover and like, you know, like mad, like looking like kids, like pictures of like kids' faces being angry. And I remember first being like, I don't want pink and blue on this cover because I have a whole chapter on gender and why it's really not a great idea to be emphasizing, you know, gender differences, and pink and blue are such like emblematic of like, I was like, no pink and blue. And then I was like, and I don't know, I mean, I kind of like the crayon, but it's also like a little cutesy and I just don't know. And I went back and they were like, yeah, you know what, we don't really like it either after that. And then they honestly came back with this, which is so different.
Awesome.
And I was like, oh my God, I love the dinosaur. Like I love it so much. And actually, I don't know if Dan Blank was on here a few minutes ago, and he and I are like have been working together for a while on like bringing the book. I don't know. How do I describe what we do? I don't know. He's amazing. He's like helped me really with marketing the book and stuff. And he was like the dinosaur. He's like, you got to use the dinosaur as like props, and you got to find the dinosaur and buy the dinosaur and like put the dinosaur around your house. And I think my daughter stole it. But
oh my God,
I have the dinosaur now. I found it.
It has to go on vacation with you.
Oh,
and
totally.
like,
I mean, and I've done like videos with the dinosaur. And so anyway, it has been really fun to have that prop to work with marketing the book. But yeah, it was really all the publisher that
I love it.
Amazing.
And you know, it is like you said, people will be like, oh, is your book the one with the dinosaur? Like it kind of like sticks in your head, right? I love when you mention that people are like, oh, thanks for your title. Now my kid won't stop saying asshole. You know, like right? It's good. Like we need that. It helps with our memory, which is not so good these days. So how did you? So you've been writing forever, like, and all these different amazing publications. Like, did you sort of fall into the parenting writing when you became a parent? Like, how did that transition happen for you?
Yeah. Yes, basically. So, I mean, yes, I've been writing about science and medicine for 15 years now. And then when I had my son, who's now 10, I just had so many questions about everything. Right. And I found like Google didn't always answer it to the degree I wanted. Like I wanted to know, like, what does the evidence say? And I found that there was like tons of science about parenting, which I hadn't really known before. And so then I started writing about the science of parenting. And I wrote a column for Slate for a long time that was basically like a science-based parenting column where I addressed like my own parenting questions and my friends' parenting questions, looking at science and talking to experts. And that was super fun. And then, but I never thought I was going to write a parenting book. Like for some reason, there was something that made me think that like that wasn't something I think honestly, it's like rooted in this idea that like writing about parenting, like there's a sexism involved where it's like writing about parenting isn't serious writing and it isn't like science writing. And I honestly, for a while was like scared that it was going to harm my reputation as a science journalist to write a book about parenting. And I was really resistant to it. And which is really messed up, you know, because parenting's like the hardest thing out there. And then, eventually I think like, a lot of things happening in the world where I was seeing a lot of bad behavior. I was seeing that hate crimes and bullying were going up. And I was like, and my kids were old enough where I was really like starting to think about like, who are they becoming? Like, what kind of humans am I raising? And how do I make sure I'm raising good human beings? And it all kind of came together. And like, honestly, I was out one night with my husband and I just said like, I think I should write a book called How to Raise Kids Who Aren't Assholes, because that is to me like the most important thing right now. And that feels like a pressing need in this world that is so like broken, you know, and it also just felt, like, I, I don't know. It felt like it was something good to do for the world. To like, I was like, if I can help some other parents with science strategies for raising good human beings, then like collectively we will be raising a future generation of like good human beings who fight injustice instead of contributing to it. And it just felt like this is something good I can do, not just for my own children, but like for the world. And so I just
Mm-hmm.
decided, yeah, let's do it. And I reached out to my agent and said, I'm thinking of a book called How to Raise Kids Who Aren't Assholes. And he was like, whoa.
He's like,
But then
okay.
that was it. And yeah, and I guess the
Did
rest is
you
history.
do did you do most of your writing and like the process during the pandemic?
No, it was all
Okay.
before, because
Okay.
I don't think there would be a book today if it had to have been written during the pandemic. No, the funny
Right.
thing is it was due March 1st, 2020. And I am
Okay.
so grateful that I was actually on time with it. And I turned it in, I think, on like March 2nd. And then
Wow.
literally a week later, like the world ended. You
I
know?
feel like I feel like you and I are on like the same timing. Like I definitely started earlier too, but then
Me
like
too.
all of my rewrites and edits, like everything. And
That was
it's
during the
funny,
pandemic.
I'll
Yeah.
never forget my editor when I was writing the conclusion, which was the hardest part, and it's the shortest, but I had so much trouble. He's like, well, you really need to talk about the pandemic. And I'm like, but it'll be irrelevant when it
Mm.
is published.
And then it's
Damn it. So
not.
it may be my fault. That's not scientific, but it may be my fault that we're still in the pandemic because I said that. I like
You
tempted
wrote
fate.
about it in your conclusion.
Because I said like, oh, but I did talk about it a bit because like, how could you not?
Yeah, you had to. So, and what's your origin story for your book? Like, what? I mean, you have that a little bit in your book, but like, what? Yeah, tell everybody.
It's similar. It's like similar to yours. Like I really never set out to write a book either. I I love to tell stories. So actually, like my father was a storyteller, and he sold life insurance, number one, but he like didn't really love his job, but he loved people. So he loved that he was connecting the clients and hearing about like their worries, and he was like a really like a really people person.
Hmm.
And he started becoming a storyteller as a hobby. So we're Jewish, and he really loved like the Jewish folk tales, and he was a writer, and he wrote all these really like beautiful stories with nice morals. And he started doing it at like local temples and synagogues and doing it on the side. And he sort of got like a name for himself. Oh, and I see the pediatrician mom. Hi.
Yay! Oh, we have a
So
good question.
what are your best tips for someone who's an idea for a book but no idea where to start? Oh, okay, we'll both answer that. That's a great one. So anyhow, it's sort of in my blood, but very similar to him. I can't spell. Like I don't really understand commas. I put them in all the wrong places. I have a different editor who does my blogs
That's,
and like some of my longer social media posts.
yeah.
And she told me she's coming over and taking the comma like button off my computer. Like I no longer get one. So that held me back. Like when I think about language arts in school, I always liked it, but then I was scared of papers and I just see red, like that red pen.
Yeah.
So we're starting to understand learning a little bit and whatnot. And there's so many tools and spell check. And when blogging became a thing, I was like, oh, blogging is casual. Like I can do that.
Hmm.
I can put a comma in the wrong place because that's the way I'm talking to you. Like it's okay. So that really opened up the possibilities. And I really had like a similar conversation with my husband one day. I'm like, I can't get everything I want to say in a blog. Like it's not working. I think I have enough for a book. And I thought he'd be like, yeah, right. But he was like, yeah, you probably do. Because that's just him. He's like so chill that way. And I sat down and wrote the first chapter. And it's still sort of the first chapter. And that's just what happened.
Yeah.
And I had no idea if it would be picked up by anyone. I didn't know, but I was like, okay. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So
That's great.
I love, pediatrician mom, who I'm such a fan of. Best tips for someone who's an idea for a book but no idea where to start. My best tip is just to start. So I actually I work with a lot of kids who struggle with writing and reading due to often like some disabilities or just like behind for lots of reasons. And even when I teach like brainstorming, I love the idea of like a sloppy copy. Like I'm not looking at your spelling. I'm not going to tell you put capitals in. Just like start, whether it's, writing a bunch of stuff out, like dictating a message, just put it down. That's my go-to writing. I sometimes get stuck in my own head where I don't know how to do it. I don't know what I'm going to do. And when I just sit down and start, it goes somewhere. So that's my advice. But Melinda, I'm curious, like, what your take is on that question.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways that you can come to write a book, right? Because you can self-publish. My experience I wanted to work with a more traditional publisher, and so, it might help for me to just like briefly say what the process generally is, and
Mm-hmm.
also kind of what I did, which might be a little bit different. So, I mean, usually if you want to sell a nonfiction book, if it's fiction is different, but I'm assuming, I don't know, that you're talking about nonfiction, you will ultimately need to write a book proposal, which is like kind of like a mini version of the book where you have like
Mm-hmm.
here's what the book's going to be about overview, here's why it's important, here's why we need this book, and like the table of contents, like here's what the chapters are going to look like, and then a sample chapter, and then summaries of all the other chapters. And this can be, and I don't know, like it could be like 50 pages long, it could be shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Nonfiction. Okay. So you do have to like, so it is a smart move to start writing, but you kind of want to be thinking about it like maybe in a proposal form. Like you started writing your first chapter, Frankie, and that's great because that could be your sample chapter in a book proposal, right?
Yep. Yep.
What I did though, before I wrote my book proposal, because that's a lot of work, is I did reach out to some agents and
Mm-hmm.
basically was like, I have this idea, would you be willing to chat with me over the phone to talk about whether this even is like a sellable idea? Because I don't know, but like here's my idea. And a lot of times, especially if you have like a platform or you have some expertise, obviously you're a pediatrician, so agents would love to talk to you right now. You hop on the phone with a few agents, you can talk to as many as you want. You really are only bound to a particular agent if you want to work with an agent once you've signed a contract with them. So you can talk to them and say, here's my idea, what do you think? And they can give you feedback and they can ask you questions and sort of help you sort of flesh out like, what would this book look like? And then at that point you would start maybe working on a proposal, and you might end up like this, deciding. So, and also it's hard to figure out how to find an agent. That's a whole nother conversation. But one thing I do, and I did, is I like looked at the acknowledgement sections of books that I liked that were similar to the book I wanted to write, and
Yep.
figured out
Yeah.
like, okay, who is so-and-so's agent, and then looked up and Googled their name and like emailed them. And so that's literally what you can do to find an agent sometimes. It's just like find agents that represented other authors like you. And then, yeah, I talked to agents. I wrote the book proposal. And then you end up, signing kind of with one particular agent that you like or who really believes in your idea. And then they work with getting it out to publishers and basically proposing your book to publishers. So that's the traditional route. And there's so many other ways to do it. Again, you can self-publish too, or you can find it, I think with smaller publishers, sometimes you can like write the whole book and then try to sell it. I think there's all sorts of different ways, but that was kind of how I did it. So I hope that's helpful. Okay.
Yeah. I'm thinking if there's interest, like I have some sources I can share too. There really was some great tips on the internet. There were some great writers who actually have done blogs about like what should a book proposal look like, what shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
it look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, like, my biggest piece of advice for people like going into their own business in any way is not to be afraid to like take people out to coffee. And that's more of a 2019 thing, so maybe more of a Zoom, because maybe you should be afraid. But but like I'll say like my whole journey in 2019, like before pandemic in September, I was laid off, and I had to decide what I was going to do next, which led to this whole journey. And literally, like anyone I'd ever talked to who may have good advice for me, I took them out to coffee. And I'm telling you, it's not my thing. Like I can speak professionally all day long. Small talk makes me super anxious.
Me
So
too.
I really push myself. When I look through all of my like Facebook friends and people I stay connected with, I knew somebody who was a publisher, but actually like in like more scientific journals. It was totally not the right area for me. But I said, hey, like I have this book proposal. Can you tell me if I'm like doing it the right way? And he was like, you know what? I have this book agent I just talked to who does parenting books. You want me to connect you? Like that started my journey. So don't be afraid, like coming to things like this and asking, hey, how'd
Yeah.
you do it? Like, don't be afraid to reach out and ask people. I also looked at like books that I liked that I thought might be similar and who published them.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to find like a real in life bookstore, and it's getting harder and harder, I remember I spent like like a whole glorious like hour just looking in the parenting section at a bookstore and taking pictures and seeing what was out there and what wasn't out there, because that's part of the proposal too. You have to know what audience you're writing to and like what the need is. And you know, I'm curious whether you found this, Melinda, as a parent, pediatrician mom, and like we have a lot of really great parents I see who are on, so maybe you guys can talk to this too. I found there was quite a lot written about pregnancy, babies, and toddlers. And once I had a school age kid, I couldn't find as much. And I'm like, oh my God, give me a book, like give me an article, tell me what to do. I want to know what people know works. And that was one of the reasons I wrote my book. I felt there was a need. Now, if you have a 5 or 6 year old and you maybe already know that you're, heading towards an autism diagnosis or your child's speech delay, you may find some good resources, but there wasn't like a general, what do I do when my kid is challenging? Which lane do I go down in parenting? And oh my God, I was listening to that chapter last night where you talk about all the different kinds of parenting and like, which kind of parent do you want to be? And it is overwhelming. It really is. And I think I love your ideas, like your philosophy of not putting your pressure on yourself to say, I am like an attachment parent. I am this parent. You can take bits and pieces and make it work.
Uh-oh. I can't hear you all of a sudden. Oh, there you are.
What'd you say?
I couldn't hear you for a second. I don't know if it was just me, but now you're back.
Oh, it was a phone call came through. I thought I fixed that, but I guess I didn't. Even having 3 kids, it's like I almost have to be a different parent for all 3 of them some days. So, it reminds me of being a young teacher, and I would go to a training for like a wonderful reading program, and they'd be like, you have to do these 3 things in this order. And I was always like, but what if that doesn't work? They're like, oh no, it always works, right? And then what would you do? You go into your classroom, you close your door, and you do what you know you need to do. So that's my philosophy of parenting. Like I still will use that empathy stage from Love and Logic, the Jim Fay, like brilliant philosophy, but I wouldn't call myself a Love and Logic parent. There's pieces that just don't work for who I am and pieces that don't work for who my kids are. But I'm so glad I read it because there's so many parts of it that I do use. And, I'm going to pick up Melinda's book, and there's so much in there that really helps me understand why things work and why things don't work. I love your approach to the screen time. That's been so helpful to me right now. So, that's sort of the way I've looked at it for sure. I'm going to keep reading.
I know.
Keep trying things. Yeah,
exactly. Me too. I read so many parenting books now and I pull things from each one, but like, I don't necessarily take the whole philosophy from it, but like if things really make sense or seem like, oh, I think that's going to work for my daughter or my son. Cause I have 2 very different children too. Like, yes, you take what works and and I really appreciated that about your book too. And also just some of the like underlying points that you kind of kept making about like, really understanding that behavior, you have to think about the capacity of your child and the skills that your child has, and also like what's underlying that behavior. And instead of just looking at the behavior at face value, I really, really appreciated that in your book. And just,
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to think about with like humans right now too.
Oh yeah.
At working with so many kids in the therapy capacity, I also work with a lot of parents, and I've started to realize that some of the things I was asking parents to do, they didn't have the capacity to do either. Right. So like, let's talk about like the parent behavior. I'm like, but we talked about that. Why aren't they trying that new approach? And I'm like, because they can't.
Yeah.
Right. So I knew that about kids forever. Like, if you have a child who maybe is newly diagnosed with ADHD, so they don't have the compensatory strategies yet, and you're going to punish them because they're not sitting still, like it's not going to help them. It's not going to help you eventually, right? Like you're going to teach skills. And then once we know that they're able to do certain things, we can hold them accountable. But we have to give the same grace to ourselves. Like we only have so much capacity.
So
yes, keep reading, but we may not be able to totally revamp our parenting in this moment. So if the only thing that you get from Melinda and I is like, it's okay, we're all doing our best, like, woo, we did our job.
Yeah, it's hard for everybody. Yeah,
Yeah.
completely. Yes, if that's the one thing you take away, that is the most important thing. Like, give yourself grace right now. It is such a hard time.
Yeah. Oh my God, I could talk to you all day. I didn't even realize what time it is.
Oh yeah, I do have to get
Yeah,
going.
and I
know,
actually
I
have
could
to
talk to you
like
all day too.
go work in a building, which still blows my mind every time I have to go like into a school. I'm like, how do I wear pants that are appropriate? Like, I don't even know what I'm doing, but
I'm still wearing my pajama pants that have dogs on them right now, but you can't tell because
right. No, I have to now do my business on the bottom too. So anyways, Melinda, this was awesome. We're gonna have to do this again because there's so much to talk about. Thank you everybody that tuned in.
yeah, this was amazing.
It was so fun to see all of you here, and we will share this video too for those of you who joined us midway. And I hope everybody gives themselves some grace. Maybe we all should our goal for this weekend should be extra whipped cream, and we'll all be okay.
Extra whipped cream. I love it. Yes. Do that for yourself.
Awesome.
Or whatever your equivalent of extra whipped cream is.
Right, exactly. Tell everyone where they can find your book.
Oh yeah, it's at bookstores, it's on Amazon, but I always love supporting independent bookstores. There's also an audiobook that I read.
So great. I love that's how I did it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And where can everyone find your book?
Yeah, so my book, local, if you're a Michigan, Oakland County type person, you can do BookBeat online through bookshop.org. At The Rail, which is a new amazing place in Commerce that's selling all kinds of self-help materials. Also Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the big booksellers. So thank you guys. And Melinda, this was awesome.
Awesome, Frankie. Thank you.
So good to finally Instagram live meet you. And we hope everybody has an awesome day.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.